Hello and welcome to the 10th episode of Shadow of the Cast, a Marvel
Woo!
Champions podcast. I'm VillainTheory, and you might have heard him. I'm here with Nelson. How's it going?
It's going fantastic. I'm really excited to talk about this box. It's a spoiler alert, a good box. It's a very, very good box.
Yeah, we're talking about Age of Apocalypse today. I'm very excited to talk about it, especially because there has been such a long wait. So if you're not aware, there were delays on Age of Apocalypse in the UK, which if you couldn't tell from my accent, is where I'm from. I think everyone can. And yeah, I had to wait several extra weeks to get the box to play it because it was going to be hard to do a podcast about something I hadn't played at all. Now, Nelson, this is kind of your fault. So what do you have to say for yourself?
Oh my goodness. I don't know if I can explain anything that I haven't already said. So we're just gonna leave it at that.
It was at the end of our last episode where we actually said we were going to do the next episode early, and now it's been late. And you said you would take personal responsibility.
Oh, did I really?
Yeah.
That sounds like something I would say. Okay, well, that's on me. I apologize to all the listeners. Yeah, that's a tough look for me. It's a tough look. But
I'm
at least we're here now. We're here now, and we have Age of Apocalypse. We both have Age of Apocalypse, and we're going to talk a lot about this box.
Yes, let's get into it. Where do you want to start? I kind of want to start with the side missions.
Oh, yeah. Your favorite part of the box, right?
So the side missions are the the big campaign mechanic in the Age of Apocalypse box. There's basically some kind of separate game area, whether it's special side scheme, big minion, and this is my one big negative for the box. Everything else, actually, spoilers, yeah, I quite like. Yeah, in some parts, I really like it. But the side missions, not my favorite.
Yeah, it felt like there was so much risk and so many resources, and so you had to dedicate so much of the gameplay to those side missions in order for them to become successful, with not that big of a payoff. I guess the payoff was more that you didn't get the negative going into the next mission, because if you pass it, you get some sort of boon. If you fail it, there's some negative detriment that you have to carry through the rest of the campaign. But like, what it kind of boiled down to is I found myself, there was a campaign where I never touched the side missions until Apocalypse 2, where you have to beat the side mission in order to beat the campaign. I just let it ride, and it was kind of fine. But when I focused so many resources, especially early game, like if you spend a lot of your early game where you're typically spent building up your hero to kind of take on that villain, if you send those to the side mission area where you cannot interact with the rest of the game state, I was struggling. It was tough. And so it was a weird balance on how could I interact with the side missions, but also not, lose the game. I don't know. Yeah, I'm with you. For me, it was a miss in the campaign mechanic, but I don't really play campaigns, so I guess it didn't really affect my overall view of the box too much.
I have the exact same thing. Normally I get the box, play the campaign, and then the campaign is kind of dead to me. I like the standalone scenarios. I like to mix it up, change up mods, change up heroes. Unless I'm publishing a deck, which I haven't done so much of lately, it's rare that I will play the same deck, 5 times in a row. So I kind of feel, I guess you can change it up a little bit in this one, but I'd want to change character, change hero, that kind of thing. The big thing for me, aside from everything you said, which I agree with, is the side missions kind of felt like a distraction, not just a resource sink or a challenge. It was a distraction because they're kind of their own separate area that you cannot interact with normally. You play allies to that area, but their abilities are basically blank, and you have to take this special, I don't know what it's called, mission attempt to try and trigger those allies by discarding cards and hoping the resource icons match up with the allies' resource icons. It's like this weird mini game off on the side. I'm trying to play my game of Marvel Champions over here.
Yeah.
The first sort of side mission minion I got, the Overseers they're called, was Sugar Man. And that guy made me very, very angry. He looks very funny, but we were playing on 2-player, and he's got 10 health. It's 5 health per person for him. And you have to try and defeat him. Well, if you happen to discard the wrong resources from the top of your deck in these mission attempts, he heals. So we got him down to half health, did a mission attempt, he healed more damage than we had dealt. He healed like 6 damage or something, back to full health. Then he goes back to half health. Guess what? We did another mission attempt. Heals back to full health, damage gets him down to half health. I'm tearing my hair out. Like, what am I meant to do here? I just got the wrong random luck. So, a few negatives about side missions, in my opinion, and I don't really like to recommend to any listeners, not to play part of a box. But I would say if I played the scenarios in order and followed the comics, but didn't do the campaign mechanics, I might have had a better time personally.
Yeah, but that's fine. Side missions are okay because we got a banger of a box. You want to talk about some of the villains that we got?
Yeah, so I really like, I'm just going to say, I like all of the villains here, and there's one I like a little bit less than the rest, but honestly,
Alrighty,
they're
spill
still
it.
all.
Spill that. What is it?
You want to hear
Yeah,
it?
I do.
I don't know.
No, I want to take a
Okay.
guess. I
So,
want to take a guess.
okay.
Ugh. I'm gonna say the villain that you like a little bit less is Dark Beast.
I actually really like Dark Beast.
I do too. I do too. But okay, so where I was coming from is I think I like the modular sets that Dark Beast comes with, and if I look at Dark Beast without the modular sets, he's very vanilla. That's the only reason that I was thinking about that. But okay, what are you thinking?
You are on the exact right lines, but I'm going to flip that around and say Unis. I
Okay.
love the modular set he has, the infinites, but I can take that out and put that on another villain and get a very similar experience. What I think both Unis and Dark Beast do is they are very centered around their mod set, and they kind of just add on to it in a way that other scenarios don't, but they're still, anchored to that mod set. So I do actually really like Unis, but if I had to rank them, I do just put him down just a little bit, a notable bit, but not anything to say he's a bad villain. He's just a good villain, and the other ones I think are actually great villains. So yeah, that is Unis. Should we talk about Unis a little bit?
Let's talk about Unis.
Cool. So Unis has the Infinites modular set, and he's all based around this. It has the gene pool permanent setup traded keyword side scheme that starts in play. And this side scheme doesn't do anything bad by itself, but it does add threat to itself if a ally is defeated by anything but consequential damage, which basically means chump blocking is off the menu, unless you want to have a lot of threat to deal with. And what the threat on there, what the threat on there does is it basically boosts Unis himself, the villain, and also some of his encounter cards. I think basically just the infinite soldiers, and giving them nasty effects such as quick strike or surge, or for Unis, I think it's like retaliate and extra boost icons and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
So you want to not.
That's the big one.
Yeah, that's the huge one actually. Yeah, that's if you have 6 threat or more on Gene Pool, Unis is Stalwart, which means you cannot stun him, and you want to stun him because you don't want to block with allies.
Yeah. I always hate when I throw Professor X out there. I confuse Unis with Gene Pool having 2 or whatever threat on it. Then I used Professor X. You can't use him as a chump block if you have 2 because then you lose the confuse. So you have to dance around. So maybe if Gene Pool has 0 threat on it, you can throw Professor X out there. Maybe use X to thwart, confuse Unis, chump block, put it back at 3. But then I think I drew. There's a card in his set, or maybe it's in the Infinite set that adds threat to Gene Pool when revealed. I was like, no,
Yeah.
and he lost the Star Wars. I was like, no. But no, I really enjoy Unis. I like the ways that they are incentivizing not running chump blocking, which is a very viable and a very strong strategy in Marvel Champions, in ways that are not just giving the villain overkill or something like that. I like the design space that we're seeing, where we saw it a little bit with Project Wide Awake and the Zero Tolerance mod set, where we're getting, and then Unis here, we're getting reasons why we don't want to throw allies in front of the attack. And I like this a lot more than just kind of overkill on the villain.
Yeah, I have actually quite enjoyed overkill on villains, but like with the flight mods that we got in the previous expansion and stuff. But this is kind of more interesting, definitely. I was going to mention Project Wide Awake. So in Project Wide Awake, Operation Zero Tolerance, that side scheme, basically you lose the game if you block with too many allies. In this one, Gene Pool will never make you lose directly, but you're getting all these different consequences and stuff. So you can kind of block in an emergency, and I don't feel like, I'm, that much closer to losing the game. I just have to work a bit harder. And in some ways, I think I prefer that. They're both very interesting. I do wish the Operation Zero Tolerance side scheme had permanent like this one, because this mod set, you drop it on anyone, that Gene Pool is instantly in play. It changes the scenario from turn 1 before the villain even has a turn. And I think that is so amazing. So that mod set is incredible. This villain, who a lot of his extra encounter cards and interactions just add on a bit more threat to Gene Pool or interact with it in some way. It's good, but I can put the infinite, modulus somewhere else, and I kind of have the full villain experience from them, and most of the Unis experience is kind of what I'm getting at. But Unis is still really, really fun to play.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I want to follow up and ask, have you played the Gene Pool modular set with any villain that you've really enjoyed? Not Unis.
I don't think I can name one where it really stood out to me, but I sense that you might have one.
I I have played it with a couple. I can't think of something that jumps out to me, but the immediate thought would be something that chump blocking is just so prevalent already in. And so I think Venom already kind of de-incentivizes chump block with that boost card that gives him overkill, which can be a very dangerous. But I think like if you have someone that hits really, really hard, I think that would be a fun one to throw it in because now you really have to find a solution or play a high defense hero or something like that. Ronin is kind of the obvious one, but I don't want to. I don't want to do that with Ronin. And
I kind of do. I kind of do now. I was actually playing Ronan just before we started
oh
recording.
yeah,
Today. And I just gave him his normal modular for that one. That does sound interesting. He does have like his own little army, so I feel like the sort of soldier theme, the infinite soldiers, does kind of work. It
and
sounds awful.
yeah, it does, right? And I think the final thought on that, at least from what I have, is it'd be a really fun challenge to see someone with stalwart like Thanos or someone who hits really hard with the Gene
Oh,
Pool modular set because now you have to solve a very challenging problem. And like Kitty Pryde can do it because she has, this like phased ability where she can negate damage. But like, how would you do that? And like, you can chump block. It's just like it's kind of a risky. It's like chump block. The threat on Gene Pool doesn't matter until it does.
that sounds really interesting. What if I was like Star Lord against Thanos, so now I can't stun him and I can't block with allies? What do I do? That's
Lose.
interesting. No, I will not lose. I will take more encounter cards. It will work out
Yeah,
somehow.
exactly.
So you brought up Dark Beast briefly before, and I would go ahead and say I think Unus is the easiest villain in the box, which makes sense as he is the first one. But Dark Beast, I would say, is actually fairly on the easier side as well. Definitely compared to the other villains on the box, in my opinion. Would you agree with that?
I would agree with that. I think that there is something to be said about Apocalypse 1 once you understand the mechanics and how to gamify him. But I still think that Dark Beast is slightly easier than Apocalypse 1. But I do think Apocalypse 1 is a little bit easier than I was expecting him to be.
I've had really mixed experiences with Apocalypse One. A couple games he start, pretty easy, and then another game where I struggled to take out the Predator on the first turn. We had things started to snowball with bad encounter cards, and that was
Oh, yeah.
interesting. But
That can
but
get pretty nasty. But yeah, Dark Beast, I don't think he's an easy villain, but he's a highly modular villain, and that's what I really appreciate about Dark Beast because when he comes in, he comes with 3 unique modular sets that have these settings. There's Genosha, Blue Moon, and the Savage Lands. If you want to play with some dinosaurs, and you're gonna choose a random one to start with. Dark Beast interacts with these. They're not permanents; they're just settings. But there's a special on them. When Dark Beast attacks, you're going to resolve this special. That's maybe adding threat, dealing damage, or whatever. But these also come with their own cards. So if you choose the Savage Lands, you're going to have this setting, but then you're going to shuffle all the dinosaurs into the deck, and Dark Beast is going to interact with those, and Dark Beast is going to get some special benefit as well. He's going to either gain like all the minions gain guard if you're on Blue Moon and stuff like that. But Dark Beast is another one like Unis, like you were saying, where he just interacts with these modular sets. And I think the modular sets are the more interesting and more unique thing about the encounter than maybe Dark Beast himself is. But you get to play these modular sets with a little added interaction with Dark Beast. I really like Dark Beast. I really like the modular sets. I like the interaction that you get with the modular sets. And I do think that my enjoyment of Dark Beast is tainted quote a little bit with just how much I enjoy the modular sets, but I like them. I like Dark Beast.
yeah, the mod sets are really, really good. We've got dinosaurs, we've got these Gladiator and his guys on the moon. Then we've got Genosha, which is big thing with mutants, and I love how they're trying to track you down. You get the escaped mutant attachment, and then all the sort of police bike people are chasing you down,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
it's really really fun. What I like about Dark Beast and why I sort of rate Una slightly down for the mod set being so good, like but elsewhere, but not Dark Beast, is that you don't know what mod sets you're going to have for Dark Beast. You know, I know Unis is always going to have the infinites, but Dark Beast has that replayability. It's very much like Mr. Sinister from Next Evolution, where you're going to have those different superpowers, and you're probably going to see two of them in a game, but you don't know which two. So you can try and build for one, but you might never see that one at all. So it's really interesting, and I think that changes it up, keeps it unique. So Dark Beast himself, his encounter cards and things, yeah, they're very generic, but he's kind of a platform to make those modular sets shine. So I do enjoy him a lot. You know, he almost feels like there's kind of a simple elegance to his design. I feel like he could have been released in Rise of Red Skull and would not have felt out of place.
I agree. I agree with that. And I really have enjoyed, and we did this at Con of Heroes, where we took some of the modular sets, Savage Lands, Genosha, and all of that, and mixed them in with other villains, especially with like modular sets from Mojo Mania, where they have other setting environments. And so we had, Savage Lands going into high fantasy from and like, so there's just like this constant revolving of these passive benefits that was affecting the entire table. And it was a good time because those are also setting environments. They have the win or real, discard all the other setting environments. And so their Savage Lands is not permanent. So once it's out there, it can be replaced. And so it was kind of interesting to have that interaction with them. But these are also ones that I have enjoyed putting into more villains, similar to the Mr. Sinister mod sets, because they have the setup and they're impacting the game turn one.
Yeah, I've said just how much I like those Mr. Sinister sets, in various places, definitely on my channel. And these are the exact same thing. Before this expansion came out, I did a video about what we need next in Marvel Champions, and I was like, I want more setup, mod sets with setup abilities, things
Yeah.
that affect things from the beginning. We got 5 in this box. We got the Infinites, we got Genosha, Savage Land, and Blue Moon. And we also got Clan Akaba, which we'll probably talk about with the last villain in the box. But they're really, really solid. And yeah, I always enjoy Dark Beast. If someone said to me, hey, you want to play Dark Beast? I'd always be down for that, no problem. Whereas, that might not be the case for certain other villains in the game.
That's fair.
Alexa won.
Do you have a favorite mod set out of the Savage Lands, Genosha, or Blue Moon? Do you have a favorite one?
Oh, that's such a good question. This might be surprising because I also really like the other ones, but I actually like Blue Moon. There's something about the way it gives all minions guard, which I think is the least impactful kind of permanent thing. But I feel like the encounter cards sort of, card for card are maybe slightly worse. They have, I think, revealed effects, and they have teamwork, and I've been enjoying the new teamwork rules. Maybe that's something we should talk about. But, I've been playing in 2-player specifically, and my favorite game with Blue Moon, where I have had a good experience with a different villain, and actually I almost hinted at this to you on your stream. We tried Magog with standard free, but we also put Blue Moon in there because it's got like gladiator theme, trial by combat theme.
Yeah.
And Magog has a very small deck, so you will see those encounter cards you add in, like Blue Moon, a lot more often.
Yeah.
So we had a lot of teamwork just in 2-player triggering, and that was really fun. I had a lot of fun with that.
Nice. Yeah, I think Blue Moon mechanically is my favorite. Thematically, it has to be Savage Lands, dude. Dinosaurs are awesome. Like, dinosaurs are so cool. But that's cool. I'm going to have to try Magog with some of Blue Moons or just any of these. I want to go back and play Mojo Mania with some of these Dark Beast modular sets.
You might have to home rule it a little bit because you're meant to for Spiral and Mojo use the what are they called? The show settings, but have some dinosaurs. I like it.
I won't tell if you don't. How about that?
Maybe Mojo's broadcasting a documentary on dinosaurs, and then he's covering events in Genosha. And
yes, I'd watch it.
I don't know if I would. Maybe, but yeah, Dark Beast really really fun. Do you want to talk about Apocalypse 1 now? As we talked about him a little bit here, talk to me about him and talk to me about how you can gamify it.
Apocalypse 1 is, if you took Hela and mixed it in with Magneto, you get Apocalypse 1. And I very much like Apocalypse 1. Apocalypse 1 is probably my favorite in the box in terms of encounters. but he has 4 stages, and based on where you are playing, you start in a different stage. So if you're playing an expert, you start in stage 3, I believe. Yeah, right?
Yes.
Yeah, stage
Yep.
3. Yep. And so you're going to basically be progressing through, like, kind of moving into his citadel in order to reach his throne to make him no longer worthy, in which you can actually defeat him. And the way that it works is that each one of these kind of side schemes, think Magneto side schemes, have acceleration icons and then a overseer minion that are just the prelate. I don't know how to pronounce it, but just the opposite side of those minions. And so you cannot remove threat while one of those minions is in play. So you have to take care of those minions. And similar, or in like kind of the opposite of Magneto, kind of the big negative impact are those minions. Those minions can be very scary. They have health based off of player counts. They can be mean. You got all of that. So you have to take out those minions. But when I was talking about gamifying it, it gets a little. I think that my most successful times that I've played Apocalypse 1 is taking out that first minion and not touching the Heart of the Empire, which is that first side scheme. It has one acceleration icon, and then I use that to build, and then I blitz through the next couple once I've built up and I'm ready to take down Apocalypse. And you have to go through, I think it's 4 side schemes, right? Yeah. Or
I think
it's
it's 3
3
side schemes, but 4 prelates.
4 prelates, yeah, because once you flip, he goes into the no longer worthy, and Apocalypse is going to heal some damage at that point. But what's also kind of interesting is that whenever you finish the main scheme, whenever you finish the main scheme, instead of losing the game, he flips into his next stage. And then if you are on stage 4, if the main scheme is completed, you lose the game at that point. But he's getting a lot meaner. In stage 4, he's a 3/3 toughness with 11 hit points per player. And I really just like the design. It feels kind of like a story that I'm walking my way through. It feels fun to be able to play White Tiger turn 1 in expert mode and draw 3 cards, and like I just like it's fun to start with, stage 3 of the villain.
Yeah, I've really enjoyed Apocalypse 1 as well. He's up there. I don't know if he's my favorite, but he's very, very close. It's like Hela, but I think Apocalypse 1 is harder than Hela. If Hela, I think if you try and game it, Hela is very easy in my opinion. But
Yeah.
Apocalypse 1, he does still have some teeth. What I've struggled with Apocalypse 1 is that if you play him on Expert, he starts with Steady. Actually, I think he would on Standard as well. But then he's got the Infinites modular set recommended. And if you use that, it's now hard to stun him and it's hard to block. If you're a low defense kind of hero, it's going to force me to go Alter Ego, but then I've got the acceleration token and the threat's not too bad on him. But, things can happen, especially if you have a Prelate out. So I agree. Best strategy I've had is basically the Hela strategy. Take out that first minion there, then build up, just, tanking the, 1 acceleration token, not too bad. And then once you're set up, you just, you go on full assault mode and you siege the, his citadel, and you take out his army, take out the prelates, and then you win. And what I think has been interesting for me is I've played this in 1-player and 2-player, and it's really interesting that when you defeat Apocalypse, you get to remove 10 threat from the main scheme. In solo play, that is everything. But in 2-player, it can go up to 20 threat. So you're having to do, and Apocalypse's damage scales up as well. So I have to do 20 damage in 2 players to remove 10 threat, or 10 in solo play to remove probably realistically 7 or 8 threat. So I thought that was quite an interesting difference.
That is an interesting difference, and not one that I have seen. I have actually not played Apocalypse multiplayer. Like, I've only ever played it true solo, and so maybe I'm gonna break this out for a 2-handed game, because that is kind of interesting. I never realized that interaction.
I think the upside is only one of you would have the prelate out, but if you just defeat the prelate anyway, like it's kind of exactly the same as it would have been solo. It's funny how you briefly confused about how many prelates and how many side schemes there were. First time we played this, I thought it was like Hela, 3 side schemes, 3 big minions. So we took out the 3rd side scheme, and specifically I took out the 3rd side scheme, and I'm like, oh, hold on, it's telling me to put another prelate out there.
Wait, hold up.
that was the end of my turn, and I wasn't the first player. So the predator engages my partner, and I'm like, you have to deal with this now. Good luck.
I don't know. Figure it out. Like that's your job. Oh my goodness. I missed that on one of my streams. Luckily, I had enough to be able to take out the minion. I was playing solo, and so those minions with 5 hit points, I was able to take that out and Apocalypse. But yeah, it can be a shock.
Yeah, no, definitely. What I think I like about the difference, and a small difference between Hela and Apocalypse 1, is that Hela, once you get through all the side schemes, she is fully powered up because for every side scheme you defeat of hers, her stats go up. She hits harder and harder. But that isn't the case with Apocalypse, and once you get past the final side scheme, there's no more acceleration tokens from any of them. So he is kind of at his easiest once you're through all of them. It's just, trying to get there with that extra minion as well to get past as well at the end.
Yeah. So Apocalypse 1, how do you like Apocalypse 1? Did you enjoy it?
Yeah, I really, really enjoyed him. Like I said, I don't think he's my favorite, but he's up there. It's more of a, there's just a little fraction difference, really. I think he's very solid.
Yeah. So who is your favorite then? Have we already talked about him, or are we leaning into talking about him next?
I think I've mentioned him very briefly, so I'm going to actually bring up Apocalypse 2, which might be controversial because we have had some questions from a couple of people, and I did ask for spicy questions, but people seem to be maybe slightly underwhelmed by Apocalypse 2, but I really enjoyed him. He is a form-changing villain, kind of the first one. He's very much like Ant-Man, he's got 2 smaller forms and then a big form when you unfold it. And when he changes to one form, he does damage. When he changes to the other, he, adds threats. I was going to say removes, but that is Ant-Man. And he's got his other form where he heals. And I really like that. I like that basically all his encounter cards interact with like that. So you never know quite what form he'll be going to, but kind of the possibilities that it might be. So it kind of, you can prepare for what might happen, but you don't know exactly what is going to happen. So I think that's been enjoyable for me. And his main scheme mechanic is you add counters to it, a little bit somewhere between Magneto and Zola with their counters. And once you have enough, you get one of the encounter cards. So he can randomly change form at the very start of the villain turn, and you're not expecting it, and that can change up your plan. Like, I've stunned him, now he changes and he's got Stalwart. Okay, well, that ruined that plan. So it's interesting like that, and I just enjoy that kind of puzzle. How do you feel about Apocalypse 2?
I like Apocalypse 2. He's probably I think I really like Apocalypse 2. When I'm ranking him, he's probably one of my least favorites in the box.
We should probably mention the actual name of the scenario is En Saber Nur, if you're confused listening to this. This is his actual proper name. But the villain is actually called Apocalypse. It's just printed as Apocalypse as well. Yeah. So just calling it Apocalypse 2 for ease. But sorry, go on.
Yeah. So when I'm looking at Apocalypse 2, I think I ranked Unis as my least favorite. Then En Saber Nur or Apocalypse 2, which I will be calling him from now on, as my 4th favorite in the box. And I want to actually emphasize it as my 4th favorite because I really did enjoy Apocalypse 2. I think the reason that he was not as high as some of my other ones is it felt like a lot of upkeep, which is something that I do think will be mitigated the more I play him. Because once you play an encounter, you kind of get familiar with the mechanics, and then flipping, changing, adding these counters, discarding for superpowers, that becomes very second nature after you've played the encounter 10 times or so. While that is the, quote, criticism that I have at this point, it's not one that I think will last too long. That being said, I think it's a super unique villain. I love how when you're flipping, you get these immediate things where you're adding threat, or now he has retaliate, and it's just it can really mess with your plans, especially I think I had one where he flipped from the one where he only has 1 scheme to 3 scheme when I was down. And I'm like, oh no, now we're in a lot of trouble. And then his side schemes, you have some control over when he flips or when you want to take out these side schemes, because they have when defeated abilities. When let me just read source of power. When defeated, if he's in biomorph form, he activates against you. Otherwise, change him to biomorph and give him a tough status card. And whenever he changes, he's going to let me read biomorph because I don't have them memorized quite yet. But whenever he changes to biomorph, he deals 2 indirect damage. And so, are you going to defeat it when he's in biomorph and he's going to attack you with overkill, or are you going to wait until he flips into a different one and then switch him back to biomorph? It can get you. It's just like it's a really gamey like encounter, and so it's fun to kind of try and figure out exactly how to take it on because it's so dynamic.
Yeah, it's interesting, comparing it to Magneto with the counters and how things go on at the on the main scheme. Magneto is probably my most played villain. I mean, maybe some of the older ones just because they've been around longer. But if you look from when, I'd say even since the Motives was released, look at all my plays, I probably played Magneto more than anyone. So adding counters to the main scheme is like second nature to me. So that actually didn't cross my mind. But that is a great point, though. And I've actually had people say that about Unis. They need to add counters onto Gene Pool, then check Gene Pool when he's attacking. So I think there are elements here where, it's much more complicated in this expansion than the first expansion, which is natural for a game that's had 8 expansions or whatever, now 7 or whatever. But I've really enjoyed that. And what I think is interesting about when he changes forms is that a bit like with Apocalypse 1, actually, these are the scenarios which change a bit more in multiplayer, because in multiplayer, you're getting more encounter cards. He's changing form more often, but the biomorph effect you read out, I think, every player takes indirect damage. More players, the more damage is being taken. So he's changing form more, and he's hurting you more, which is really, really interesting.
Yeah. Again, another one that I have not played multiplayer. I think the only ones that I've actually played multiplayer are the 4 Horsemen, which we have not talked about yet, Unis, and Dark Beast. So I guess only the Apocalypses, the Apocalypse, as they are sometimes called, are the ones that I have not played multiplayer. But that's another interesting interaction with multiplayer, and it is more challenging at that point because more is happening. But it's also like that's interesting, yeah, because like the side schemes are not player scaling either. And so
that's a really good point. There none of the side schemes in the whole expansion really, maybe 1 or 2. They just don't tend to scale with the player count.
Yeah, and so like they're easier to take out, which means that they are activating faster, which means that they're getting back into the encounter deck quicker, which means you're seeing them more frequently. That's cool, huh?
It is fun. I've not tried it at 4-player, but maybe we should try it 3-player.
Maybe we should. Hey, we have a question from who is it? Saint Matthew 956. Are we still getting a Nelson Villain Theory D20 woodworking triple team up against Apocalypse 2?
Yes, so when D20 was a guest on this podcast, I kind of laid down the challenge, how'd you about this? How about we fight the last villain in Age of Apocalypse? And we didn't even know who that was at this point. And I guess thankfully for me, it turns out to be my favorite from the box. It could have been a nightmare, but I mean, I tend to like most villains though. But nonetheless, I guess it goes with my name. Nonetheless, because Age of Apocalypse was so delayed for me in the UK, we have not got to do this yet. And me being crazy, I said, let's delay it again until Iceman is out, because I think Iceman might be fun to work against Apocalypse, because he's got Star War or Overkill. And I think the frostbites that Iceman has, we'll probably talk about this at some point, or hey, maybe actually when we do this, that could be really interesting. So yes, it's still going ahead. And actually, if all goes well, this is not 100% confirmed, I'm going to knock on wood. But if all goes well, this might actually be happening the day after the podcast, or the day after the podcast comes out. So don't quote me on that, but Tuesday, Wednesday time, keep an eye out and see what happens, because we will be trying to have that go down.
Yeah, and so we'll get to see a higher player count game of Apocalypse 2. It's going to be a lot of flipping and a lot of dealing, and so I'm excited.
Yeah, I'm really excited. I think that'll be a lot of fun. And what else I think is a lot of fun, and if I've been listening correctly, I think, this is your favorite villain in this box. That is the 4 Horsemen. Talk to me about the 4 Horsemen and why they're your favorite.
So Apocalypse 1 is my favorite, but 4 Horsemen is... Dude, 4 Horsemen is crazy. I've gone from not liking 4 Horsemen to really liking 4 Horsemen to being lukewarm on 4 Horsemen. I think it all kind of depends on the hero matchup, because it can be so different for the different heroes, because every single one of these villains, and you're playing 4 at a time, so active count or multi-villain scenario, the whole shebang, each one of these, that if they have hit points remaining after they attack, then some horrible, horrible thing is going to happen to you. And it is there is not a worse one, because I think the worst one is hero dependent, which I think is a really cool way that it works. Like War says that after he attacks and he has 12 hit points in expert, he's a 2/3, so it's not an easy attack to soak. He has, so that 3 attack. After he attacks you, if he has at least 1 hit point remaining, discard an upgrade or support you control. So it's just a caught off guard. You just got caught off guard again. And that can be so brutal, especially early. And so there's this whole game of trying to not have the one that is worse for you attack you. And once they activate that, counter moves. And so maybe that is when War comes up. If I'm playing Iron Man or someone who is like a super heavy upgrade hero and I cannot lose these upgrades, maybe I'm flipping down and letting War scheme on me so that I don't have to take that activation and then it can flip over. But then there's going to be cards that say move the active counter to War and then he activates against you. And so you have to play this game of, okay, I'm going to blitz War down. I'm going to take him out, get him to 0 hit points. And then we're going to work on the other ones, because if War hits me, we're going to have just a horrible, horrible time. But there's War, Famine, Pestilence, and Death. All of them are bad for different heroes. Villain, which one's your least favorite?
So it's interesting where I do agree with you that different heroes have different horsemen that are their least favorite, have the worst effects for them. But in general, I think War is the worst.
War is pretty bad.
I'm always declaring war on War. And we've had some difficult situations. Well, I have at least. There's one game where turn 1, War was the active villain, because the order changes game by game. You put them down in a different order. So it turned out that War was activating first, and I didn't have a way to mitigate that. And my hand was just full of good upgrades, and I was like, whichever of these I play, I'm just going to lose it immediately. So I didn't play any of them.
Yeah.
I think it's really good. This was the other contender for my favorite. I think it's really fun. I'm going to throw this out there. I think this is the best multi-villain scenario we've got in Marvel Champions.
I'm processing. I think I would agree with that. I think it's definitely a very valid argument. I don't know if I can take that stance right now, because I haven't necessarily thought of it. I don't know why I haven't thought of it, but it's a really good scenario. It's one that after you play it a couple of times, like, you can kind of see the intricacies and how you as the specific hero or how the team makeup is going to approach. Because yeah, War is bad, but also Pestilence, blanking your text box can be horrendous for some characters, right? So like, if you no longer have Magik, being able to play with that top card of the deck face up, and like the whole, like, all of her upgrades revolve around that. If you don't have that anymore, now it's like, oh well, this is bad. And so there's a lot of fun interactions, and the scenario changes so much depending on the activation order, what cards you're seeing. And then like the worst part is, I guess worst part, but like they have these like golden horse and metal wings where they come out, where you attach them to villains, and then they're considered to have at least 1 hit point whenever they activate. And it's just like, oh, it gets so bad. It gets so nasty.
Yeah, I think something that occurs to me as you say this is there is kind of I hope this is the right phrase, like a through line for the design here that I think Caleb, who I think was the lead designer on this box, has taken. And that is that the villain's own encounter cards all have kind of each scenario's encounter cards really have a solid theme. And you'll see this in most scenarios, but they'll have maybe a couple of themed ones and then something that might just be an attachment that boosts their attack, spend these resources to get rid of it. But here, everything Unis has adds kind of onto the infinites. Everything the Horsemen have in their encounter deck, not the modular set, but the encounter deck, is making the Horsemen activate, either directly attacking you or triggering their responses or interrupts. Their responses, as if they had activated. It's really leaning into the theme of what that scenario does. It's really driving it home, and I think that's why they feel so interesting and kind of unique and very replayable, because you're getting a lot of that scenario special thing a lot of the time. Apocalypse 1, probably the most. The one that this applies to least, but you're still getting all the product kind of stuff going on. Dark Beast, everything is activating those specials on these settings. And then Apocalypse 2, kind of like I said, he's probably going to change form or try and do something to change form, but you're not sure what form it is. And yeah, I really like that. The Horseman, that puzzle. I've played a lot of 2-player in it. It's interesting trying to figure out, like, who do we want to attack this player? Who do we want to attack that player? Manipulate things. And maybe I'll put a stun on this guy, or maybe we'll burst this one down to 0 so that doesn't trigger. And then the encounter card or boost card or something will completely change up that and mess up the
Yeah.
plan. But it's not so punishing in that, it's game over. You can normally, it's, I think these scenarios in general, more than maybe the average expansion, they're more battles of attrition. They don't have these big moments where they just kind of kick you out of nowhere and completely delete you, I would say. Maybe there are some exceptions. Dark Beast does get double boost cards on some of his activations and so on. But that's something I think I really like about this.
Yeah. I think the worst cards in this set are like the Horsemen of cards with the boost, or just
Yes.
like the when revealed. Like the boost on like a Horseman of Famine is after this activation, Famine activates against you. So you just like you get double doinked. Now they don't get a boost card for the activation, but still, if they have health, then you're taking both of those forced responses. You're taking both of the attacks. It can just be brutal. But oh my goodness, I played this in a 4-player game, and I was running Cable, and when in a setup of 4 horsemen, you get to every player chooses one of the side schemes to put out. And so in a 4-player game, you have all 4 of the side schemes, which are like Plague and Pestilence is an example. They all start with 6 threat, and then when defeated, the player basically takes the negative force response of the associated villain. So Plague and Pestilence, whenever you defeat this, you treat your identity's text box if it is blank. But I had like the most busted open hand where we put these 4 out. Cable, I put the side, I think it was Specialized Training. I think I put Specialized Training out on the table. And then I drew into Overwatch, Even the Odds, and A Passion for Justice. And so I was able to, like, I cleared, it was like 30 something threat on turn 1. I was like, oh, let's go. And so I was able to wipe these. Now I got absolutely destroyed because I took out so many side schemes, and like now all of these when defeated effects are hitting me. But like at least I like one player had to deal with all of that, and so it was just like the dream opening to this setup. So I think I enjoy the 4 horsemen more in multiplayer. 4-player was a lot. 4-player, there was a lot to keep up with because that active counter is moving, things are happening so quickly. But I think 4 horsemen in a 2-player, like our 2 hero setting, is probably where they shine the most. Because solo it can be very punishing.
Yeah. That is interesting though. I do like those memorable moments. That's amazing with Cable and Even the Odds. That's really very good for 4 Horsemen's opening. The more I think about it,
Yeah.
We did a really fun game where we sort of counterpicked the 4 Horsemen. So I built a deck for my partner. It was Domino with Sidekick. So we put Sidekick onto, I think, is it Diamondback? The one where you exhaust and it does damage to everyone. It's every enemy, not minion, every enemy. So we kept readying and healing Diamondback, and it kept hitting all 4 of the horsemen at once.
Oh, geez.
It was
awesome.
beautiful.
That's amazing. That's so cool. I love that.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that. That was good. So yeah, I love these villains. And I don't know if on average, I mean, maybe, but I don't know if on average they reach the heights of certain villains in certain other boxes. But as an overall package, I'm going to put this on the line here. I think this is my favorite box for the villains.
Okay. Oh, I don't know. I don't know.
He's
that's
under
so
pressure.
hard.
I can see him sweating.
That's yeah. Oh my goodness. Yeah, that's a again, it's a very valid argument to make. I'm trying to think of what box could, contest it. Honestly, I really like Red Skull. I think Red Skull has really, really solid villains in it. Mutant Genesis is pretty good, although I think that as I play more and more of those, I think that it's not a real contender when you're comparing it to Apocalypse. Next Evolution was really good. Okay. I can see it.
There are arguments, Rise of Red Skull is such a good box, but I'm not that keen on Absorbing Man. Sinister
That's fair.
Motives I really like, but I just feel like Venom Goblin maybe slightly overtuned. I'd rather make him more difficult with mod sets than the base. But it is each to their own. This one, I just feel like all 5 villains, I'm very happy to play any other time. And as someone who plays a lot, I'm kind of always craving more replayability. So 5 really good villains I'm very happy to play has made me a very happy villain theory.
Nice. Nice. Okay, so we have some questions that are revolving around the villains, and one of them that I want to ask is from Dennis, and we kind of alluded to this earlier. So, were you hoping for a different villain instead of Apocalypse 2? So they were hoping for Dark Phoenix to be that final villain. We were kind of all a little surprised, or at least I was, when I saw, there were two Apocalypse in the box. Like, that was kind of crazy. Talk to me about that. Was that something that you were okay with, or would you wish that we had a different named villain there?
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm actually going to throw out another question we got from someone called Cbav, who basically says, "Did we feel disappointed by the final apocalypse scenario?" I think there was a lot of expectations, maybe something different, maybe for something a bit, unexpected. And personally, when it was first announced that it's Apocalypse again, and I looked at how he worked, I was like, "Oh, great, we've got another Apocalypse. It's going to be very similar to the first one." And you add counters to the main scheme, and you discard for a card with that certain trait. It's going to be like Magneto with the magnetic cards. I was like, okay, so I kind of got another copy of Apocalypse, but he's going to be a bit like Magneto, who I've already got as well. And I was super underwhelmed by that reveal, I'm going to be honest with you. However, as you guys have just heard, that's my favorite encounter, scenario in the
Yeah,
box. So
nice.
uh, it doesn't feel like Magneto at all. Yes, you discard cards for a card with the same trait, but it is a different timing. All those cards are very different. He works very differently. And I actually love the elegance in how, and I feel like I'm using that word a lot this podcast, but a lot of his effects mimic a lot of Apocalypse's one's effects, but they're done in a different way. Something that is maybe a treachery or an upgrade for Apocalypse 1 is actually one of the form changing effects for Apocalypse 2, but it's slightly different, but maybe it's on the same theme. Like, I think Apocalypse 1 has an upgrade that gives him overkill called biomorphing. Then in biomorph form, Apocalypse 2 has
Oh,
overkill. Yeah.
yeah.
I like it. I actually really like it. So I had low expectations and it surprised me in a good way. I was hoping it would be a different villain, but I'm actually really happy with what we got. So, uh, what about you, Nelson?
I don't I didn't necessarily have a negative reaction to having two apocalypses. We have like I think 12 Green Goblins at this point. So like it's
15.
oh yeah. Oh yeah, I forgot about the Green Goblin scenario pack. No, uh no, I did not. I don't typically ever have an issue with that. For me, from a thematic standpoint, it doesn't really matter. Like the comics, you're not only ever fighting Apocalypse one time in the comics, right? So why should we only ever fight the villain one time in the game? I'm fine with that. I understand the want from some people who are deeper in the lore than maybe I am, where they want to see their favorite villains in the game, and I think that's totally valid. And just from like my standpoint, I don't really even know the other X-Men villains, so I'm like, okay, cool, Apocalypse again. Like, here we go. So it's not. I don't know if I even would know who I would replace him with. So that being said, um, I don't think I really had an issue with there being multiple of the same named villain, especially because they feel so different and so unique mechanically.
Yeah, and we've got a couple of other interesting questions, which I think I'll combine as well here. So, from Matthew Cowan, I think, if I'm saying that correctly, they ask, do we think Age of Apocalypse was a better end to a trilogy of expansions compared to Mad Titan's Shadow? So, Mad Titan's Shadow kind of was the end of a line of expansions. We had Rise of Red Skull, Galaxy's Most Wanted, then Mad Titan's Shadow, all kind of leading up to Thanos, kind of. And
Surprise!
Age of Apocalypse was all leading up to Apocalypse, kind of. You can follow the line, and there is a story, so which is pretty cool. We also have a question from how do I say this? Mac and I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
But they ask, do you see trilogies as a good structure for Marvel Champions campaign stories? So I thought this was a really kind of interesting thing. So they are separate questions. So I'll say to you, Nelson, do you think Age of Apocalypse was a better end to the trilogy or Mad Titan's Shadow?
From a mechanic standpoint, I think Age of Apocalypse is a better box than Mad Titan Shadow. And so when we're looking at it from a purely game state, not necessarily a story structure, AOA is better than Mad Titan Shadow. From a story structure, I think I like AOA better as well here, mainly because I can't remember the story through line that connects Guardians, Red Skull, and Mad Titan Shadow off the top of my head. Now I haven't played them in a trilogy sequence in a while. But I do like kind of the mutant story that we was told through the 3 boxes of the mutants. That being said, I like what they did with the different teams in a trilogy sense and kind of combining them into 2 standalone boxes, right? We got Guardians in Galaxy's Most Wanted, we got Avengers in Rise of Red Skull, and then we got a mix in Mad Titan Shadow. And so, kind of cheating a little bit and hopping to the next question, I like the idea of trilogies as a structure for Marvel Champions to tell a story. I think that's nice because you get kind of this overarching story, and that story can be interacted with, or you can buy the product standalone and never interact with the story, and that's totally valid as well. But I like it as a way to kind of get here are 3 boxes and we got all mutant stuff, but I really like the mixing of teams and having those teams come together so that we can get an Avengers box, we can get a Guardians box, and then we can get a box that's mixed and we get a little bit of both to kind of get more content than just one wave of Avengers. We actually got Avengers, one wave of Guardians, we get like a wave and a half of Guardians. Where, we got 3 waves of mutants, which was awesome. But like going forward, it would be cool to see more of those team mixed up. And so we can get, maybe a little bit more champions or spider support or something like that in the trilogy.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. I'm going to agree with you that I think Age of Apocalypse was a better end to a trilogy. I feel like the story from the first box to the third box, I feel like you don't really need it too much. But I think the second box and the third box connect together quite strongly. I almost feel like I don't want to spoil it for people, but everyone probably knows. But yeah, it's just interesting. I think that was really fun. I love the start of the story as well in Age of Apocalypse's campaign. Like how the comic opens is quite hard hitting. I like that. Mechanically, I also think I prefer Age of Apocalypse. I did really enjoy Mad Titan's Shadow. I think there are a lot of really solid expansions for this game. But as you guys have just heard, I love all 5 villains, and for me, that is a huge thing. And I'm going to come out and be a little bit controversial. I don't know if I do like trilogies as a good structure for Marvel Champions. Maybe it is good for them, in terms of a campaign story, you can carry it through really clearly. But I kind of wonder if I would have preferred like Avengers, Guardians, then Spiders, and then they could come back to Avengers later, and like something like that. Just mix up different teams. Maybe it's a bit like what I was saying with campaigns. I want to play a different hero in these different scenarios, not same hero 5 times in a row. Maybe I want those different teams kind of splashed about a bit for variety, but I don't dislike trilogies, and I really liked all the boxes we got for the mutants, especially. They're really good. So, I would say stories are pretty good in the trilogy, but I would probably prefer less trilogies.
Okay. No, I think that's fair. I think you can do exactly what I was saying, where you have an Avengers box, a Guardians box, and a mixed box, even if they're not tied together through a connecting through line of a trilogy story, right? So, like, I want Defenders, we want probably more Spider-Man, because always more Spider-Man. Do those have to be connected through a story for them to be effective? No, they don't. So, totally agree. I totally agree. This is not the game I play for story. While I do enjoy the story, I read through the campaigns. It's not something that I am playing, and this is just a personal me. This is not how you should play the game. This is just how I interact with the game. I'm not playing this game to necessarily tell a story.
Yeah, I think I'm the same as well. I do enjoy the little story bits, and I would be interested in seeing, more story integrated into the game if it was done in, word of the day, elegant way. I think that could be fun. We actually did have a question from Nathan McCormick, and they're asking us what villain mechanics we would like to see returned or explored. And I actually think we had a very similar question a couple of episodes ago, but they also say what they would like to see is a kind of a choose your own adventure style scenario. So they're saying something like different side teams coming out, which, may have different choices on. And, so I think more choices would be something I'd like to see explored in scenarios. But yeah, I agree. I mean, I am, privileged enough that I also have quite a lot of Arkham, which is another game by Fantasy Flight Games. And the story in that is a lot stronger. It's really built into the foundations of the game. So I'm looking for story. Yeah, I'll probably go elsewhere.
So while the villains are super awesome in this box, I still think my favorite thing that comes on the encounter side of the table that we got in this box was Standard 3. I love Standard 3. This is replacing standard 1, or if you're a masochist and play standard 2, it replaces that in your encounter deck, and it's going to be, you always choose a standard set to play in a game of Marvel Champions. This one kind of softens the turn 1 draw of a Shadows of Past, and instead every single card kind of is leading up to revealing your set aside nemesis for your minion with like this Pursued by the Past mechanic. It's a permanent card, sits out there, and once it reaches 3 plus the number of players' counters, your nemesis comes out. Basically, draw Shadows of the Past. I'm a huge fan of Standard 3. I really, really, really enjoy it. I like the way that you can kind of see it coming. You can prepare. Drawing shadows on turn 1 is not impossible. I did it. I have triggered a Pursued by the Past nemesis introduction in a true solo game on turn 1. I think I got like Dark Dwellings, and then I got the Pursue. I got the one that adds 3 counters. Like I added 4 counters in the first villain phase, which was achievement unlocked, whatever. But like that is significantly mitigated. You kind of know when it's coming, and you get to see your nemesis a lot more, right? Like even though, at least in a solo game, I think that you get to kind of see a lot of that game design, whereas it was kind of a flip of the coin on if you were going to draw into it with like a standard 1 or standard 2. What are your thoughts on standard 3?
Yeah, interesting. I really, really like standard 3. I was going to do a review of kind of the modulars and villains and stuff on my channel. I decided to scrap it. So if you're listening to this on YouTube, this is probably it for a good while. But I was actually really, really high on standard 3. My opinion has changed slightly now, but I still really like it. I like what you're saying about these pursued counters, the way you can see it coming. I think that's really interesting. And I don't really miss Gang Up. I don't really miss the conventional Shadow of the Past,
Yeah.
I don't feel like the encounter deck is missing anything, and I like how different it feels. Although it is in some ways very similar, I think that's kind of what they were going for. Similar, but different, and just it's interesting. I haven't ever had the sort of nemesis come out on turn 1, but I will say probably over half my games since Age of Apocalypse came out have been in 2-player. So we need to get up to 5 counters. So we need to have 2 players get bad luck as sort of boost card kind of things or encounter cards to drive that. But what has been interesting in 2-player is it's kind of like gambling in terms of who's going to get the nemesis out. We can see there's like 4 out of 5 counters on there. Who's going to get that last one? When we've played our recent game against Expert Ronan, I've been testing out some of the characters I think are, maybe in the stronger variety, shall we say. So I've had Cyclops and Spider-Man, Miles Morales on the table. And Miles Morales' nemesis set, I don't really care about. It's, a pretty easy one. But Cyclops is really scary. It has Mr. Sinister, and it has this encounter card in it called Gene Therapy, which if you defeat his nemesis side scheme, it will come into play on the villain. It gives the villain an attack boost with piercing and overkill, which is basically a little bit like fanaticism, which it was Ronan already. Guess what came out in that game? It wasn't Prowler, it was Mr. Sinister, and Ronan had Gene Therapy on him twice throughout that game. And
tough.
Yeah, we did win, but it was scary, and I like how it was kind of that sense of dread. Who's going to be what nemesis there? So that was a fun multiplayer aspect to it. I do really like it. I mean, I kind of like this part of it, but I also kind of don't like it. So I don't quite know where I sit on this. My opinion will probably change over time. But since you can add counters as as boost cards, since boost cards can add counters, it means your nemesis can come out before the encounter card, part of the villain phase, which also means the nemesis minion will attack you after the villain has attacked. And we did a game with Venom and 4 symbiotes attacking you. That's
tough. That's not great.
It wasn't the best thing that's ever happened in one of our games. Oof. And so I do think there are tiny bits like that. And there's also I actually really like this card. It's the kind of obligation style thing where at the start of your turn, it makes you discard a card and that adds counters, possibly 2, to make your nemesis come in. But if that brings your nemesis in, you then got to deal with your nemesis set, but you've still got that card there that you have to go Ultra Ego to get rid of. Or every turn, you have to discard cards and get even more counters going. So some of those things that kind of bring your nemesis out while you already suffer the other bad thing does scare me a little bit. But it is still fun. It is really, really enjoyable. I hugely recommend Standard 3. So you, I think, have almost answered this already, but we have a user here, and I don't know if this is Maurice or Mary C, but they have asked, is Standard 3 going to be something you play often?
For me, Standard 3 has replaced Standard 1 as my default standard set. I'm typically playing Standard 3 Expert 1 at this point. Um, I like it significantly more than Standard 1, and that's how I will defaultly play the game at this point.
So when I first got Age of Apocalypse, we did the campaign and that, and we did use Standard 3 for that. But then I went on standalone mode against the new villains with Standard 1, so I could judge them with Standard 1 and not Standard 3. So I had kind of, a kind of a point of reference, how the other scenarios play with Standard 1 as well, so I could kind of judge them. But now I'm quite, certain of how that affects things. I feel like I've got a good grasp of that, because I do like to test and analyze. I'm very nerdy. But I am now playing with Standard 3 basically all the time. And it's new, it's different, and I do really enjoy it. Now, in the long term, has it replaced Standard 1 for me? I don't know. I can see myself maybe mixing it up 50-50 at some point, but it definitely feels like it is sticking around for the long haul. So I would say, to me, yes, it is something I play often. Has it completely replaced Standard 1? I would say not. And I would say there is kind of a beauty in the simplicity of Standard 1, in that you don't have to mess around with counters. You don't have to look at counters. Does it have them? Does it not? You just kind of get the effect. It's very quick. It's very easy. But I do like Standard 3.
And I think Standard 3, it's not that I'm never going to play Standard 1 again. I really like the ability to pick and choose which one you want to play with. And maybe if you're playing Venom against Ronin, maybe you don't run Standard 3. Maybe because if you get those symbiotes on the boost, then that's just absolutely brutal. Or maybe you do want to have that challenge, and that's fun. I think there may be a day where I go back to Standard 1 as my default, but at this point, Standard 3 is my default, and that may just be Cult of the New. But I totally see it, and it's just like I'm really glad that it's on par with the level of difficulty of Standard 1 and not harder like Standard 2 was.
I think it is harder.
I I I think I don't think it's exactly the same difficulty. I think it's slightly harder, but it's not. When you look at it on a scale of Standard 1, 2, and 3, they're the same level of difficulty, because the difference in difficulty level when compared to Standard 2, it's so minimal. At least in a true solo.
Yeah. Yeah. That's interesting.
Basically what I'm trying to say, I'm glad it's not as hard as Standard
2. On that, I think everyone listening agrees with you.
Yeah.
Let us know in the comments if you're listening on YouTube, or if you want to email it in, you can at shadowofthecast@gmail.com, and let us know what you think about Standard 3, because I'm really interested. Where I had the expansion delayed for so long, I avoided basically seeing anyone else's feedback about almost everything here. So I'm actually not 100% sure of the, community's general reaction. But that's interesting. We have another question here. I think I'm just going to go and straight up ask, and that is from some dodgy geezer called VillainTheory. And
oh gosh, that guy.
So I'm like you. I play with either Standard 1 or Standard 3 and Expert 1. VillainTheory here asks, where is Expert 3?
Oh,
where is it?
I want an Expert 3. I really do. I predict, this is my bold prediction of the episode, I think that we are going to have a scenario pack. I would hope that we get a scenario pack that introduces Standard 3 this wave. Right? We're still waiting, at the time of this recording, we're still waiting on 2 hero reveals. I could see there also being a scenario pack in this wave where we get the Standard 3 introduced, similar to how we got Standard 2 and Expert 2 in the Hood scenario pack.
Yeah, I think we're actually due a scenario pack. If you look at kind of the release cycle, I think this would be the wave to have one, because we did not have one in the previous wave. So I would absolutely love that. So fingers crossed on that front.
And then also, just to kind of add a little bit more thought behind why I think that would happen, I think scenario packs are typically bought by the players that are a little bit more hardcore into the game. And Expert 3 is going to be, I assume, a way or a mode to play that is going to be typically played by those hardcore players. And so you don't have to use the card slots in an AOA, which the majority of collectors and champions are going to buy, where they may not use those expert cards, the Expert 3 cards. But then a scenario pack, which I think a lot of the hardcore players and a lot of other people will get them too. You can use those card slots there.
Yeah, I would say I like playing on expert mode, but there is something about, I don't know, the surge effect. The fear I have for Under Fire is, I kind of almost wish the free encounter cards we have are more similar in difficulty, because I definitely think Master Plan generally is easier, Exhaustion generally easier, than Under Fire will scar me. It will hurt my soul. So I wouldn't mind seeing those evened up a little bit in an expert 3 or something. But I'm curious. I think they could do a lot of different things with that. So
they really
yeah,
could.
Here's hoping.
All right, so we got another question for Standard 3. This is from Living for Games, and they ask, with Standard 3, does that change how you view the Nemesis's difficulty?
Yeah, so in some way, I think I already answered this a little bit. I talked about that multiplayer game and like Miles' Nemesis, not too bad, don't worry about that. Mr. Sinister, Cyclops' Nemesis, I am worried a little bit about that. So it's definitely a factor. And something about that game I actually wanted to talk about is that I had a new, I say aspect card, basic card, Stepford Cuckoos, down on the table in play, which lets you say no to this treachery card, get a different encounter card instead. And we had a point where we had 4 out of 5 counters on Pursued by the Past, and I drew Evil Alliance, which is basically the one that adds counters, and I was Cyclops. And as you might have heard, I did end up having Mr. Sinister come out into play. But my thought process was why I didn't skip it when I could have skipped it is because what if I skipped it and I just had another card from Standard 3 that put another counter on, or next turn that would happen. I was like, we have a good board state, let's go for it. But I'm always thinking about that Nemesis, and when you can see it close, it really does impact things. And I will say, when I've had Standard 3 and solo games, some of them have gone, so fast. I actually still have not seen my Nemesis. But in 2-player with Standard 3, we've always seen somebody's Nemesis, I think, every single time we've used it. Except once, actually. We just nuked Dark Beast. He had a bad time. And I think I was playing Nova with Dive Bomb. And so anyway. But generally, yeah, because I know, at least in 2-player, I'm definitely going to see a Nemesis set. It is something I'm thinking about much more keenly. It's not just a kind of so much of a chance thing. What about you, Nelson? Do you think that's changed up for you?
I think so. I think the Nemesis sets are significantly more in consideration when you're playing Standard 3 because, they're going to hit the table potentially multiple times and at a more consistent rate than just getting unlucky and drawing shadows multiple times in a single game. And so, I think that I do change how I view their difficulty. I think that some of those heroes, like Valkyrie, gets, taken down a peg as she should have. We needed to nerf Valkyrie, and I think Standard 3 helped with that a little bit. Just because we're going to see Enchantress more often. And we talked about this with D20. We talked about this with D20, where, there are going to be some that are going to be more negatively impacted by the higher consistency in which your Nemesis comes out. That being said, like, on a overall whole, I'm here for it.
Yeah, I think it's fun. I do like that they kind of feel like they matter more now. And like you said, Valkyrie really needed a nerf. I'm sure D20's been celebrating.
Yep. So speaking of heroes, you had a pretty bold statement earlier talking about that you think that the villains in this box are the best set of villains of any box. I would like to echo that statement for the heroes. I think that this pair of heroes, not necessarily that these are my favorite heroes, but I think when you look at the heroes that come in the campaign boxes, as a sum total, Bishop and Magik are the best pair of heroes that we've gotten in a box. What do you think about that?
I think that is a very bold statement, but I am tempted to agree. I do love Spider-Woman, but I'm not as keen on Hawkeye, for example. Exactly. And there's always one that I like a little bit less. And actually, I think Cable and Domino was one of the strongest pairing of heroes we had in the previous expansion. So this is pretty bold statement, but I have really enjoyed both of these heroes. I really enjoy Magik. I really enjoy Bishop. Do I enjoy them more than Cable and Domino? Ooh.
And Cable and Domino are the pair that challenges the statement from me.
Yeah.
Which is awesome that it's the last 2 expansions. It really, speaks to the design, like, growth of the game, where it's like the last 2 expansions are in contention of the best heroes. It's like that's exactly where you want the game to be. And so from that standpoint, heck yeah, let's go.
Yeah, do you want to know something crazy? When I did my top 15 heroes video, I had both Shadowcat and Colossus in there, who are the 2 box heroes from the expansion before Evolution.
Heck yeah.
So I'm enjoying these characters a lot. Yeah, this is really interesting. It might just be caught of the new, but yeah, I might second that. Yeah, I really like Magik and Bishop. I have small concerns. Let's get a bit controversial. I have small concerns that Bishop might become, let's say, maybe slightly repetitive over time. Once I've done, played with his gimmick a few times, and that is something that I don't think a lot of listeners will agree with. So I'm curious to see how that goes. But I do enjoy both of them immensely. I like them in basically every aspect, including pool. So yeah, they are fantastic heroes. Who's your favorite, Nelson?
I like Magik more than Bishop, and I just really like the sequencing playstyle that Magik and Domino and those types of heroes provide. And so Magik just is my playstyle. Like if I could take a blank sheet of paper and write down what I would like in a hero, Magik would be that. That being said, Bishop was a significantly bigger surprise for me. And so I wasn't sure. I don't think I was gonna dislike Bishop. I wasn't sure if I was going to like him. I just didn't know. And so breaking him out and how much fun I have had with Bishop has been so surprising in a fantastic way. And it's just been like, oh my gosh, I really have been enjoying Bishop. And I want to ask you the same question, but I also want to circle back to the repetitive nature of what Bishop can be. And I've had that concern too, but I think I've kind of talked myself out of that concern because of his repetitive nature of dealing with having resource cards, healing with those, and dealing damage with those. I don't think is the only thing that he does. I think that enables him to play in a multitude of different ways. You see taunt and protection. You can
Yes.
run Voltron. You can run strength in numbers. You can run have at these. You can have it as a supplemental. You can really heavy into it and flood his deck with 10, 12 resources. So it's like while I think the mechanics of the gameplay and how he interacts with his uniform and his rifle are very similar game to game, I think the way that you can deck build around those mechanics can create more dynamic gameplay than I was expecting.
Yeah, so before the expansion was released, I was solidly looking forward to Bishop more than Magik. I really enjoy Domino, but to me, once she's set up, you just have too much control. And I think I've mentioned this before. I feel like I'm playing 4D chess and I'm moving these pieces around a little bit too much, maybe, just for my personal taste. Although I do love the kind of, what she does in general. I do really enjoy Domino's. I still like her a lot, but she maybe wasn't perfect for me. Magik, I think, is the sweet spot where every turn is a different puzzle and you don't have perfect control, but you do have a lot of control. So you're trying to figure things out the best way every turn in really unique patterns. And for me, that has been fantastic to play. I think she's a hero who maybe was, I don't want to say underwhelming, but I think Bishop was definitely the big surprise. He was for me too, actually.
Yeah.
He's maybe he's more fun than I expected as well, actually. So yeah, this is a great expansion. And Magic's maybe some similarities to Domino in how they play the top card of their deck, whereas Bishop is very new. Like we definitely had no one who plays like him before. But I think
Yeah.
Magik will age well. I think people will come back to Magik quite often just because of how she interacts with everything. So yeah, I love the sequencing. I love everything Magik does. I love trying to line up. Oh, can I get this bonus effect on my event, but also my upgrade? But then what I want to play from the top of my deck as well. Can I line everything up? And the Mystic cards are fun. I love flying through my deck. I have all
Yeah.
the cards ever in my hand with Sorcerer Supreme and everything. It's really fun. And what I want to say about Bishop is I do think, for me personally at least, I won't play him as often as Magic. I don't think he's got the same level of replayability, but that's not to say he's a bad hero by any means. At this point in the game, we have, I think, 51 characters. So even if I come back to him a little bit less, when I do come back to him, it's going to be so unique. It's going to feel really different. And it's not like I'm lacking other heroes to play, put it that way. And
Right.
I do love how unique Bishop is. He is significantly stronger than I expected, but also more fun. Before release, or at least up, not long before release, we hadn't known about energy conversion, his defense card. And
Mhm.
I kind of want to talk about that because
Bananas. Yeah.
I love running. I think kind of 10 resources is my most commonly played amount of resources with him. I love, all those resource cards. When I've got, like, let's say 4 cards left in my deck and I play energy conversion, it's so good because every card I'm getting then is a resource. So
Yeah.
I'm just, the fact that his rifle and his uniform are not capped, they basically do damage or healing equal to the amount of resource cards in your hand. We had one game where I was using Taunt, and I think Taunt has been my favorite build for Bishop so far. And if people don't know, it's a card that is 1 cost event, makes the villain attack you, you get to draw 3 cards. Because I got attacked again, and I knew I was going to play Taunt, it had it in my hand. I held off using my uniform before, and yeah, I just got something like 10 healing or something
That's
ridiculous.
amazing.
It
Yes.
was so
Nice.
stupid. and then I'm just like the rifle just became a kind of a delete villain button, and I'm just like, yeah, this is fine.
Yeah, exhaust to win.
He does have, like, I would say some small inconsistencies here and there. You know, when I'm running 10 resources, you know, maybe turn to my hand is mostly resources, and like, what can I play to build my board or control the board? It's like, well, this one card is kind of, you know, it's not common, but it's not uncommon. But overall, he is just very, very good.
He's very, very strong, and actually makes the question of who is the more powerful hero in the box significantly closer than I was expecting pre-release. When I saw Magik, I was like, she's going to be the strongest hero in this entire game. Like, that's absurd. And Bishop, I was like, he'll be fun, but I think he's probably going to land in like a C or a B tier. I don't. That's not the case, and so I want to hear from you. I've put out my reviews, and I know you have not watched at least the Bishop one, so you don't know what I think. But from what you think, do you think Magik or Bishop is the more powerful character? And does it change your player count?
That's interesting. I should add, I don't recall when you put Magik. I know it's relatively high because they are both strong characters, but that's interesting. I give the edge very slightly to Magik, and that is only because I think she is more reliable, and I think her turn one typically is stronger, but there is a caveat there that if Bishop lines up the right cards with lots of resources and stuff, then, you know, it's just pretty incredible as well, especially if Taunt Bishop. But Taunt Bishop then runs into issues against people like Magneto and stuff, or Venom Goblin. You know, it's really interesting. So maybe villain would matter more than player count, I might say. Because, again, Magik has lots of stuns and confuse. If the enemy is stalwart or steady, suddenly it doesn't look that good. But suddenly Bishop hitting with his uniform looking incredible. He's just taking those hits like a champ, and I guess he's a Marvel champion. And it's really very good. So I would say it's close enough that depending on the situation, yeah, it could change either way. I think they are really very close. The way I've said, I think, in one of my videos is that Magik's ability to play the top card of her deck for a 1 discount is kind of like Avengers Mansion, because you have that card available. But it's kind of like Helicarrier, because you've got that, and you know, starting with a Helicarrier and an Avengers Mansion on the board for free, you know, that's ridiculous. And you're a Mystic, and you're an X-Men, and you've got stuns, and you've got confuse, and you've got the Colossus ally who is crazy good, and and Limbo, you know, control. But I think her slight downfall, and the reason she's not, like, you know, in, let's say, the top 3 or 4 characters, at least in my opinion at the moment, though I do think she's top 10ish, is that deck space is at such a premium because of all the Mystic cards, all the X-Men cards, and all the basic cards, which go really well with her. And I don't think you can take all the stuff you want for her in one deck without, you know, basically going up to 50 cards. And it would still run really, you know, really well. But it's not a case of I've built this, you know, turbo draw Doctor Strange deck that's going to spam invocations, you know, a million times. And, you know, that's just my thoughts on it kind of in that regard. But I still think she's very good. Bishop, I said this in my video as well, I just think there's a slight reliability problem. Some turns, I have no resources, and I wish I did. Other turns, I have too many. And I've tried, you know, 7 or 8 cards. I've tried 15, 20 cards. And it's how much risk you get, you know. That's the problem for me. But when he's going, he goes incredibly well. So
dude, he can be crazy.
What do you think?
I think Magik, in a true solo sense, is stronger than Bishop, mainly because the stun, confuse, the traits, all of that. I think in a multiplayer, Bishop's better. I think you can build a pretty nice, like, kind of protect the table Bishop build, which can get nasty because of how much you can heal. You can take your attack and defend it. You can defend someone else's attack. Now you have the uniform, and you have 2 of those energy conversion, energy displacement, energy absorption. He has a lot of energy X abilities. So you're discarding a lot of cards. You're going to be getting a lot of those resource cards. And so I think that I like Bishop more in a multiplayer setting. I think he's a little bit stronger. I think, like what you were saying, a villain matchup is very makes the conversation very interesting. But I think as a whole, in a true solo, Magik is stronger.
Yeah, I'm gonna tentatively agree with that. Wow, I wish I put that in my video. What I think is a small downside for Bishop, and this is really interesting. He is a different beast once his uniform and rifle are out.
Yeah,
and you know, he kind of goes from, like, I don't know, probably still a very strong B or even, you know, low A tier. I don't know. Tiers are weird to describe. There's so many characters now. But he goes from, pretty good character, well, very good character, to an incredible juggernaut once you have them in play. So if they're at the bottom of your deck, you're going to struggle more. In multiplayer, people can maybe pick up a bit of the slack, or you can go Alter Ego more easily to, grab them because you can grab temporal traded cards, which they are when you go Alter Ego. And, there are ways to work through your deck quicker and things, but if you are having to go Alter Ego to get it, and, it's just going to take an extra turn to get the effect and so on, whereas Magik, Heli carry Avengers Mansion turn 1, go. and it's fine. Yeah, that's so interesting. Both very, very strong heroes. I was just going to say, I think my opinion will change over time. I don't know if it will change where they are fought exactly, but I just know more resource cards in the future of the game, probably more X-Men, the characters this wave, more X-Men toys, maybe more Mystic toys in the future. It's really interesting. They're that close, it could change.
Yeah. What's your favorite aspect to run with these? You mentioned Bishop Taunt, so is Bishop Protection your favorite?
Nelson, don't do this to me. You know I don't like Protection. I would never admit to liking Protection as my favorite for both of them.
I'm just trying to get you to get it on record at some point.
Protection is my favorite aspect for both of them.
Let's go. Both of them, okay. Let's go.
So Bishop, I haven't actually tried that defend for the table kind of deck, but I have only played him at 2-player, not 3 and 4, so I haven't really been going for that. I've just been going very greedy with Taunt, but that is my favorite for him. It's just, if you can take the hits, phenomenal. There's just so many cards and so many resources. And Magik, I really like the way you can play a card from the top of your deck in the villain phase as well as the hero phase. And what I like is having, defensive kind of cards, which I will, if I add defensive cards into my deck, I will be able to find them to play from the top of my deck in the villain phase more easily, sometimes even without using Limbo to put them there. Sometimes they just turn up there if you're running something like a perfect defense deck, which maybe not her best way, just because she starts with that 2 defense and her Mystic Armor isn't exactly reliable 100%, but she can still do it very, very well. And she also plays allies well. There's lots of good X-Men allies in Protection. I just find that incredibly, incredibly fun, just to make more use out of her ability, really. Although, I will say I like all of these characters in every aspect. I'm going to just throw it out there as well. My least favorite for both of them is Justice. I don't think it's their weakest, but I think it has the least interesting interactions. How about you? What's your favorite and least favorite for these guys?
So, kind of also a surprise for my play style. Leadership for both of them, honestly.
What?
Yeah. I really like the way that you're able to, especially with Bishop, I think, kind of lean away from needing to use your allies as chump blockers and use them as something else, right? Voltron. Yeah. I love Strength in Numbers. I love Band Together with Bishop, right? Like you get like these really cool interactions because you don't have to use your allies to protect your own health. You want to take that attack, meaning your allies can do something else. And so leaning into a Strength in Numbers, which also solves the problem of I have 7 resources and nothing to pay. Oh, I'm just going to exhaust 4 allies and now I have 4 more cards. Right, so there's the sync with Make the Call, which just gets stupid, and like, so like there's so many like, really, I think just interesting paths you can take with your allies when you don't have to look at them as a block of a villain attack, and so I really like that. I also really like Magik in leadership. White Tiger is really fun from the top of your deck. Right, like you pay 2 for White Tiger, draw 3 cards, and an expert. Like, let's go. I just think that's just fun. Also, with like Strength in Numbers, summoning spell is just a huge tempo boost for those mystics in leadership. And so I surprised myself. I found myself coming out of this like, hey, am I a leadership player? Like, what's happening?
We swapped. Leadership is my favorite. Protection is your favorite. Yep. Generally, that's so funny. I will say. Leadership's probably my second favorite for Bishop. I do love basically everything you said, everything from Strength in Numbers to, I don't use Make the Call as much these days, but it's definitely so good for him. Like very interesting as a resource kind of thing. I'll just pay this expensive one because I've got these resources, grab what you want. And I think both of them play the X-Men trait decks very well, like X-Men ally decks, Uncanny X-Men is just particularly good with Colossus on top of your deck because now he basically doesn't cost anything. What is going on? Yeah. I will say my second favorite for Magik is Aggression. I just like the Hulk ally, and Magik likes Hulk ally.
Yeah,
that's basically
cool.
it.
That's cool. That's fun. I really like Aggression with Bishop too, with hand cannon giving him overkill with a supercharged.
Yes.
To get some crazy overkill. Yeah. Oh my gosh, there's so many different ways to build him. And we didn't even really talk about any of the new aspect cards either. And I
Yeah.
think the main archetype that came in the box with Bishop is this Sidekick card. And I know I did a video on it, you did a video on it. It's all the cool kids are talking about it. Let's talk about it.
Yeah, Sidekick's been an interesting one for me. I was really excited for it before release, and I'm still excited about it now. I do think, okay, so Sidekick is a 1-cost upgrade. You put it on your signature ally, and now it's your Sidekick. It has extra health, you recover to heal it, and so on. But we've also got Side by Side, which is the event that readies you and your Sidekick, your signature ally with the upgrade on them. And we also got a card which wasn't revealed pre-release, which we haven't talked about yet at all, which is Suit Up. And I'm interested to hear your thoughts on Suit Up in general here. But Suit Up, well, Alter Ego is an event that lets you find an ally and an attachment for that ally, just from anywhere in your deck or discard pile, which is very, very good for setting up Sidekick, obviously. Now, my point I was going to make here, which is why I brought up Suit Up and all the other cards, is I was worried before release it would be difficult to set Sidekick up because you'd have to find your signature ally first, then find the attachment to put on it. And if you found them in the wrong order, you might have to go through your deck again, or make the call. Find some other tool to be able to do it. Suit Up basically solves that problem. And if you draw it turn 1, you can set your side kick up on turn 1, and that's very good. But the point I really wanted to make after all of this is that for me, still, just having to put Suit Ups into my deck and having to try and draw things in some kind of semblance of order still, it has been a slightly bigger hurdle than I anticipated, because I thought Suit Up was going to solve things, and it helps a lot, but I think the fact you're going to have to set things up in this different order to really get going, and then find Side by Side to really get going, has slightly slower tempo than I expected and a slightly higher cost. So I think it's slightly less powerful than I anticipated, but it is still strong and it's still really fun. I really enjoy it. I think for specific heroes, it goes from, just kind of okay to absolutely ridiculous. I'm looking at X23. That's been my favorite one so far. How do you feel about it?
Yeah, X23 and Honey Badger, crazy. It just like you take Marvel Champions and you get to just become a god when you play it. It's fun.
Yeah, that is my new favorite deck for her. And
yeah,
I've been reviewing my tier list. I don't know if I'm going to update it, anytime soon. But I've been working where I think characters are again. Suit Up, well, specifically Sidekick X23 has shot up. I've done some disgusting things with that combo.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think my favorite. Oh, that's a good question. I do think my favorite deck that I've run with Suit Up, probably not the strongest, was my Quicksilver one, because you get Quicksilver with Scarlet Witch out there. Scarlet Witch has a nice impact. Then Side by Side gets to ready Quicksilver, which readies friction resistance, and it's just like this, you just tumble into a stupid amount of resources. I had a lot of fun with that. I could not, and I still have not been able to get the Captain Marvel Sidekick to work with, the Spider-Woman Sidekick and Captain Marvel deck to work.
Yeah.
I've tried it a couple times. That was the one I was really excited to get Captain Marvel. Every single time she activates, you get to draw a card, and then you're going to ready her, and it's going to be awesome. But it's just it was so slow. And by the time I finally got it set up, I was either I lost, or I was I could have won 2 turns ago if I played a different deck. And so I think it is a cool archetype in the sense that it doesn't work every single time. You have to have the correct hero, and it's going to work sometimes with different deck builds. And so I'm happy with that. I think one of the interesting question that we got is from Cool Caleb, and they asked, how did we feel about Sidekick, which we've been talking about, but also how do you think that we're going to get more support for this card in the future? Okay, I'm ready. Villain's warming up.
I am so intrigued for more support for this card. When I first read this question from Cool Caleb, I thought to myself, well, if they support it in the future, they're going to have to put that card in another pack. It's going to take up deck space. It's another reprint, but it's only one because it's a one-of card, and I think it's unique. So it's no big deal to do that, and they could do a lot of this. Have your Sidekick do this, have your Sidekick do that. And I don't know if I have any specific suggestions right now, but what I like about Sidekick itself is that it adds an extra benefit to when you recover with your hero, because I feel like interacting with recovery stat is something they are starting to do a little bit more. they've been doing things like X23's obligation, you have to recover to get rid of it and so on. But I like that it interacts with the recovery. So I would love to see something else that interacts with recovering with Sidekick. Maybe there could be an interrupt, an alter ego interrupt. When you recover, get to do this other cool thing as well with them. Maybe even something, you could even have kind of maybe something that damages your Sidekick, which would then make healing them, kind of work that way as well. You've got different angles you could go with it. I don't have a specific, but that is fun. What about you?
I think that every single hero that is ever put out from here until the end of time, this is going to be something that we look at, right? What is their signature ally? Do I want to have them onto the table? Do I want to have them have more health? The answer to that, probably 50% of the time, is yes. And so I think the support for Sidekick in quotes could also just be new signature allies that we are getting with these packs, and how that's going to dictate a whole nother way that we can play those new heroes. And so maybe not the answer that maybe not the fair answer, but just like once we get Jubilee, how is Jubilee Wolverine Sidekick going to look like? Or if we get down the road when we get Iron Fist, and how is his interaction going to be with his signature ally with Sidekick? I just think that that's really interesting. I think we will get some support cards that directly reference the Sidekick. I would be a little surprised if we didn't, but I think we will. Maybe I could see I don't know. I don't know how that's going to be interacted with. I could see us getting some support. Maybe it's attached only to a Sidekick character or something along those lines. But I think the more exciting thing for me is this just being a whole nother way that we can look at building a new hero whenever it gets released.
Yeah, I really do like Sidekick, so I think that's a great point. I'm now intrigued about more signature allies in the future. I was thinking, oh, what about Iceman, who's about to release, but not in the UK, who has signature allies you actually cannot attach Sidekick to. You can't have upgrades on them, which is interesting. But Jubilee Wolverine, like you say, I think that could be really fun. So yeah, tons and tons of potential. And I actually want to talk about the Spider-Woman Sidekick deck you mentioned. Have you tried, because Spider-Woman has two aspects, have you tried leadership and the pool aspect to try and get it set up? Because you get those triple resources, and you can still use tic-tac-toe to heal up your Sidekick as well, if
that's
your
cool.
recovery's not enough. So
yeah,
that would be my suggestion for that. And you can use Mulligan to try and set things up faster as well.
Yeah. Okay.
So if you ever try it again, if you try it for a third time, that is going to be my suggestion. And you know what? I might stick to the pool subject. I might just walk it back to heroes very, very briefly. Have you tried Magik or Bishop with the pool aspect?
I tried Bishop with pool at one point with those self X cards, because he has all that healing, and the self X are triples or doubles or singles based on how much damage you sustained, but you get those back in. So I tried a build with that. I don't actually even think I streamed that one. I think that was just when I was tinkering around getting ready for the review deck, but I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it a lot. I think that Bishop. I have not tried pool and Magik though, or Magik and pool.
Yeah, I enjoyed Bishop with Paul, and I might even say he's one of the better candidates for it. Magik Paul I actually really enjoyed, and if you ever feel like a different game with Magik, what makes Magik really special with Paul are two things. The first one of them is War, not the Horseman, but the upgrade, which when you discard from your deck, depending on the cost, you get to do different damage to the villain or an enemy actually. And because you can see the top of your deck, and because Limbo can swap it there, it's a bit like with Domino, but even better, I would say. You can line things up to deal massive damage with it.
That's cool.
But also, since you can see the top card of your deck, you can use rock, paper, scissors to discard a card to try and draw a card, and you're going to succeed every single time. So it's now basically a one-cost Avengers Mansion to go with your ability that kind of is already. And I did forget to mention that in my review, so shout out to the person in the comments. I don't remember the name who reminded me, but yeah, it's really very good. So I thought it's worth a mention for those characters. Really interesting.
Nice. That's awesome.
So this is the part of the podcast where we talk about what we're doing next week, what's coming up on our channel, that kind of thing. But I actually kind of want to bring it back to something we didn't really mention. We talked about our favorite villains and things, but we never talked about their difficulty in a deep way, or at least the final villain, because I know a lot of people were thinking Apocalypse 2 was going to be, the next Ronin or Venom Goblin, and they were kind of hoping, they really they wanted this guy to be a huge spectacle. And I'm kind of curious for your thoughts on this. Do you think that Apocalypse 2 is harder than Magneto, or even maybe as hard as Ronin? Just your general thoughts on that.
I would say that it is Ronin, Magneto, Apocalypse 2 in that order in terms of difficulty. I think Apocalypse 2 is a challenging villain, but I don't and like but I don't think that he is as unfair as Ronin. I don't think Magneto is unfair, but I think Magneto requires more strategic play in order to play successfully than Apocalypse 2 does. And I think that therefore makes Apocalypse 2 a slightly easier villain than Magneto. Mainly like with Magneto, understanding when to let that main scheme pop, when to flip, when to push, how to kind of control the game state and rush through. I think that Magneto requires a little bit more cognizant play in terms of directly countering Magneto's gameplay. Apocalypse to me feels like the added the added of just like flip into a random stage and then you're dealing with that requires slightly more tactical play, which is very challenging. But I think overall, I think that makes him a slightly easier villain than Magneto. What do you think?
Yeah, it's interesting, and I wonder if it's because I played him at 2-player more. But there was a time where I thought maybe Apocalypse 2 was slightly harder than Magneto, but I think I'm going to agree because Magneto also has those 3 copies of Master of Magnetism, which makes him activate with double
Oh
boost
gosh,
cards, which
yeah,
with his fairly small main schemes means if you ever go Alter Ego and that comes up, the scheme is gone, and maybe 2 schemes are gone honestly for that whole round, depending on if you
yeah,
could confuse him or not. So. And even if you get hit and you don't have a good blocker or anything out, or something like that, that's also potentially ending games. So where I said this expansion, I think the villains kind of have attrition. Now going to kind of pressure you over time, but they're not going to do these massive swings that will just wipe you out. Magneto can do that while also being very high, attrition, very high tempo, lots of stuff coming at you.
yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
Speaking of Apocalypse 2, as well as things that are coming up in the next week, we kind of teased it at the beginning with a question, but we are going to be, as of right now, we can say we are playing Apocalypse 2 with D20. The two of us in D20 are going to be taking on Apocalypse 2 to see if we can
Yeah.
win. So I think that's kind of, actually, is that being hosted on my channel? I don't actually know. Where is that going to be held, Villain?
I assumed your channel because
Okay,
I
cool.
don't even have a single gameplay video on my channel yet. All my
Sweet.
gameplay on YouTube is on your channel.
That's amazing. So on my channel, the 3-player team up is kind of what's coming up on in terms of content. I'm also working on some of the older hero reviews, and then Iceman is coming out, so we're going to be doing a hero review on Iceman coming soon.
Nice man.
Iceman.
You know what? I'm not 100% certain what else is happening on my channel because I was going to be Iceman. I'm going to have to go back to the drawing board, but I have just done a video on the evolution of heroes, and I have promised a second part, so maybe that. We'll see. I've been playing a lot of the stronger heroes against stronger villains myself, because I've been kind of experimenting with that, seeing where people stand with all the new aspect cards, all the player side schemes we have now.
Tell me a little bit more about these harder villains that you're playing, or maybe should we save that for potentially the next episode?
You know what? What if our next episode was all about the most difficult villains in the game? And
Oh, now we're talking.
yeah, okay. What if we got in maybe a guest who was kind of known for playing, some of the harder villains,
I
particularly maybe
like
Venom
that
Goblin?
idea. I like that idea. What if I'm gonna throw out how about Web Warrior Fanatic? Can we see if we can get him on?
Well, we already did the episode on Web Warriors. I don't know if that's too much. I mean, we're gonna have to, put it out there to some, feedback groups, some get some. No, I think maybe I could allow it. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, a little fun there, but the plan for the next episode is to kind of talk through some of the more challenging villains that we have in the game. And we are going to have Web Warrior Fanatic on, And if you're not familiar with their content, they're all over the front page of Marvel CDB, and they play some challenging villains. And so we're getting an expert in the room. So I'm pumped about that.
Yeah, that's gonna be really fun. I think you've done a video with him on your channel before, but I've not actually done a video and actually spoken to him, verbally before. So that's gonna be really fun. I look forward to, kind of meeting him, and hopefully you guys all enjoy it as well.
And as always, if you have any questions, we answered a lot of questions. There's actually a lot of questions we were not able to get to on this episode. I think that the recording time of this episode is probably going to be a little bit shorter than the actual runtime of the episode, but it's a long episode, so I'm pretty happy about that. But as always, if you have questions that you want to ask us, you can send those questions into shadowofthecast@gmail.com. Or if you're watching on YouTube, comment on the video. And then Villain has been putting out community posts before our next episode where you can comment and put those there as well.
Yes, I love all your questions. They're amazing. And I'm sorry to those we didn't get to today. But something I am interested in, if you want to comment or, email, if you want to let us know, I'm curious, how do you guys feel about the length of the podcast as a whole? Because, spoiler alert, most of our podcasts, they normally overrun, and I'm having to try and chop these things down because we like to talk about this game. So I'm curious. There's definitely more material if you're interested, or if you think it's a good length, or whatever. Yeah, I'm interested. But thank you so much for listening. It's been really fun. I love this box. If you've not played it, highly recommend it. Side missions, but generally heroes, villains, modular sets, really some incredible stuff here.
Absolutely. Yeah, and thank you all so much for listening and hanging out with us. I'm looking forward to our next episode. I'm looking forward to our gameplay with D20. Got some really exciting stuff coming up on the
Yeah.
horizon.
See ya.
Bye.
And end podcast.
Yeah.